Hey guys, welcome to another podcast. Today's guest is actually quite a surprise. He is Payne, 2910, beloved shit talker in all of my Twitch streams. And yeah, if you know Payne, you know he's very special. He's actually the person who inspired me to generate the combo mads in the first place. He's the one that gave me that idea. So if you enjoy any of the combo mads, big credit goes to him for giving me the idea in the first place, as well as many other things that I simply will not be able to remember. So welcome to this podcast, Payne. It's a pleasure to have you. My first question to you is, how on earth did you come to this point?
Okay, as first of all, I would like to say hello, YouTube. I'm here. Check me out. Ma, thank you for blessing me all the time. It's good to know. All right. Yeah,
Okay.
a bombastic opening from my side.
Yes,
So,
very
how
bombastic.
I, yeah, very bombastic. So, how I came to get to be known among the Nioh community is first of all, before checking out the game itself, I had watched a couple of streams to see how the game was felt by the streamers who played it. Most of the time, they uh, they said that it was very Dark Souls-ish type, a very challenging game that tested their knowledge, their patience, and most of all, their reactive timing. So, as a history of a gamer that I am, back in the day in the mid 2000s, when uh, when I didn't have any money to purchase any consoles. I used to play on a borrowed consoles from my friends, and we used to have a couple of games that were relegated to couch co-ops. But I got into first of all I got into the Devil May Cry scene back in the PS2 days. That was the one that got me engaged because it was established as a stylish combo heavy game that made you get enthralled into learning the game with the knowledge as fast as possible. So I'm one of those players who got into the Devil May Cry scene franchise first, and then after a couple of years later back, I got into the Ninja Gaiden. Though Ninja Gaiden felt very off for me because I was not used to getting bombarded by enemies from all the sides, and I had to uh, think about it as quick as possible. How will I survive? So yeah, Ninja Gaiden was the second franchise after the Devil May Cry scene that hooked me in, and years later on, I still didn't have the money. I was not able to purchase the PlayStation 4 console. I had to go to cyber cafes. Yes, people, there are cyber cafes in India where we go for an hourly late. So I pay about $1 per hour if that is converted to pay a specific game. So one of those games was Bloodborne. I did not own the game. I had to pay for it to play it. So that was the one of the first PlayStation 4 games that I had to seek out the thrill and excitement of it. I got hooked into it, but I thought that there was something lacking in it. First of all, Bloodborne's frame pacing is very bad. That I was not used to that kind of sluggishness in the combat scenario. So this one I got into Nioh because of the fact that it was made by Team Ninja. So I was expecting a lot of um, how should I say it? Challenging situations where I had to get tested out of my skills. But the thing is, I'm one of those players who strive for getting into the skill technical aspect of the game. At first, Neo rubbed me off wrong because it had numbers game, the RPG element to it. So because of the fact that it had all the RPG elements in it. Um, I had to seek out many other streamers and information on YouTube just to see how the builds they were looking out for. So I stumbled upon Mr. Pufe here on a very fateful day that he was playing Neo. And at the end of the stream, I asked him where he was from, and I was surprised that he was from my very own city. And I was very flabbergasted to know that even Indians play Neo, because in India, no one gives a shit about this.
No
People
one
only
gives a
play
shit about
FIFA.
anything
Yeah,
in India.
no one. Yeah, people only play FIFA, WWE, PUBG. Specifically on mobile, it's a big craze around here, and Fortnite. I think I might be the 0.001% minority of the gamers representing in India that plays games like Neo. So that's my history to it, and the rest is, as all of you know, I am a shit talker.
Yes, that is most definitely what you are. Well, that is quite interesting to see how you started from Devil May Cry series, as a big fan of that, to Ninja Gaiden as well, which I think is one common element between many different players across the world. And that's one of the things I want to stress. Neo has been very surprising for me in that, at least with my experiences, that players from literally across the world enjoy it. And that, of course, works with any game, but I think with our Neo community, especially with the Discord, we have people from North America, of course, such as myself. We have people that are from India, such as you, Payne. Players from the Middle East, people from Africa, Europe, of course, and then even in Eastern Asia, of course, Japan. We have, I mean, it's just literally everywhere. And this game isn't exactly gender exclusive or anything. There are many women that play this game. Hell, even my wife has enjoyed playing it for the time that she has. And so that's been very nice that a game such as this, which seems to be so niche, is oddly inclusive. And so
Yeah,
it is especially crazy. Sorry, go ahead.
I think the advancement of the PlayStation 2 era really hooked on to people's attention, because I remember back in the day, during the mid 2000s, when the PlayStation 2 were being hotcakes. Here in India, they were sold on a modded basis. We didn't had games sold here in a legit way, in a legit reason. So people used to buy the console and get it modded, and with that came the code of piracy. So what actually happened was that because of the people modded consoles, we had an expansive library of games to play, specifically games which are coming from the Japanese side of development. Devil May Cry is always Capcom, which is always a Japanese side. I don't think Ninja Gaiden was from Xbox 360 days. Um, Many of the Capcom and specifically mostly Capcom side of action games, which tend to be hard and focus mostly on beat 'em ups and stylish genres. They were the golden eras of the PlayStation 2. So that was the popularity that Indian market got into it. Now regarding the Xbox 360 and the later PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 eras, we had we have a market, but the fact that also the fact that I'm a pirated user. I forgot to mention as a history as my gamer. I played Neo on my jailbroken PlayStation 4,
Nice.
and that's how and because of the fact that I had the option of having my PlayStation 4 to be remain jailbroken for many pirated games, I chose to make it as a legit console, specifically for Neo 2. I could
Wow.
have, the reason was because love for the franchise, and also I want to support the developers and developers for the hard-earned cash money. Earlier, I was not uh, giving a fuck about getting to play pirated games. Like I had my PlayStation 4, I had my Bloodborne, my Dark Souls, my Hitman, my Deus Ex, my Devil May Cry 4, and even Nioh. All of these games were pirated, but then something changed about it. I felt that in order to support these developers, I should make it as a legit reason to make my modded console as a legit console. So that was one thing that I had missed earlier. And speaking of how I came into Neo, as stated earlier, I had checked out many streamers who were into the Souls community and they dabbled into Neo, and they say it was different in the fact that it wasn't a two button as usually what the Neo elitists say. Not a two button uh, play style. It was more of an expanded toolkits that the player had in their hands to deal with the situation if the enemies and how they could counteract. So that was what appealed to me. Earlier, I was mostly focused towards getting onto the build side because I didn't understood what the numbers meant. As stated earlier, I came from a generation that focused mostly towards the technical aspect of the combat side. So the RPG elements, the number game, was very new to me. And for this reason, I had to search out YouTubers, information on the Google, come to the Twitch streamers, and that's how I met you.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then, of course, as Payne stated, we actually have similar roots in India. I'm not going to get into exact specifics, but it is rather remarkable that we've actually lived in similar parts of India. Just a brief personal history. So I grew up I'm an American, but I grew up quite a lot in India because I have Indian ancestry, and so my father's hometown is actually the same as where Penance lived. So chances are him and I may have crossed paths without even knowing it. And it's actually pretty remarkable that a lot of the people that I personally know from the Nioh community more or less have shared a lot of same space. So it's an interesting fact. But one thing I wanted to touch on, which is what you said. So you just talked about how basically you played a bunch of pirated games, and that totally makes sense. Just like, dude, fuck these companies. I don't care. I want to play my games. But you felt that Nioh 2 is something that's such a well done product that you decided to go, as you said, go legit so that you could really support these developers. And I think this is just a testament to how well done this game overall is made. On many of these podcasts, of course, myself and my guests have talked about how there are issues about this game, and of course there are. I know with DLC 3 on the horizon, one of the biggest critiques is simply that, hey, there isn't an Abyss yet, which there is going to be. They've already stated they're going to have endgame content. And one of the other things that many skill players are a little annoyed by is the fact that there aren't that many new active skills. Yes, they've added some things with the base game. Yes, they've added hidden skills, but players certainly thirst for more. And they'll point at weapons like dual swords or the axe, and I mean, the dual swords has become a meme because we say, hey, look, we've got it. We can eventually have a parry for every attack, every stance. And with axe, it's like there's very little L1 square or just square abilities. It's pretty much just everything delegated to triangle-based finishers and whatnot. But even despite our criticisms of this, I think everybody who plays Nioh, especially to the level that we have, I mean, we obviously really enjoy it. And we're pretty much at the point where we're complaining about, I would say, like maybe 1% of things that I think most players may not even notice. I mean, we're really playing this game to the fullest. It's a stark difference from, say, studios such as Activision Blizzard. For anyone who plays games like Hearthstone, which I do from time to time, they're right now having this whole stupid battle pass system. And basically, it's just really convoluted, really confusing, and just seems designed to suck players out of their money. And just it just feels like a shitty experience. But whereas with Nioh 2, I mean, I bought the deluxe edition for 80 American dollars. Honestly, it's been like the best $80 I've spent since the first Nioh. When I bought the first Nioh Complete Edition, it was $50, and I remember being really hesitant about buying it because I just generally don't trust game developers. Or not so much the developers themselves, but the corporate studios, just any corporate crap. And it's such a breath of fresh air to get a full game that has quite literally given me over 1,000 hours of gameplay. Nioh 2 alone has given me over 1,000 hours of gameplay. This character, the one that's on the screen, this character has over 900. And this is coming from someone who streamed the first Nioh for over 1,500 hours. So I've got so much time under my belt, and I'm still able to find fresh new things, new ways to interact, new ways to play. And it is something I think is, in all honesty, just kind of beautiful. It's just really well done. So I think Payne's actions of just deciding to go legit with his PlayStation to support the developers is just a testament that this game is, bottom line, all things considered, just phenomenally well done. Would you agree with that, Payne?
I would 100% agree to that, but it's a shame. It's a real fucking shame that the mainstream audience doesn't care about this particular franchise, because we have the Game Awards nominations coming up, and I don't see Nioh 2 in any of the categories.
I think it got Best Action Game, did it not? Or it's nominated for that?
It was nominated for that for the first game, not in the second game. I haven't seen Nioh 2 in any of the categories. So
that is a real shame.
Yeah, that just states that how niche the game is and how little the marketing of the game has been shown, even in India. Because as an India player, I would regularly look up the digital stores and how the game itself fares against other games in terms of advertising and marketing status. I would say people don't recognize this game at all. Even if someone knows about Souls, they barely think about Nioh as a Japanese Souls type game that is hard. But they don't delve into it because, as I stated, Indian players, we tend to stick with what's popular, what's trendy, and what's the laziest amount of interactivity that we can do to enjoy games. Mostly towards Ubisoft open world games that have played our markets for the last couple of decades, I would say.
I see. I think that sentiment extends perhaps to probably just all players in general. I don't think there's a drastic difference between, say, Indian players or even American players. I think it's just a matter of, it's just a whole people thing. If I was talking to somebody the other day, and I asked him, so he doesn't play video games as much anymore as he used to, but he knows what Dark Souls is. He's like, oh yeah. And he's like, Nioh? I don't know what Nioh is. And so, he'd do a Google about what you think Nioh is, and then you get the Matrix movie with Keanu Reeves and stuff. But yeah. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls for a game as amazing as this. It's kind of just one of those hidden gems that has unfortunately stayed hidden. I genuinely wish more people knew about this game so that it could get its spot in the limelight. That is the only thing I think is really missing for this game to really just reap a lot more money. I think the fact that it's sold 1 million copies, or what's it, like 1.2, 1.3 million, I certainly don't feel that's enough. And sure, that's not accounting for the PC edition, but I still think that Nioh just kind of slipped under the radar. I mean, I think of the Game Awards, games like Last of Us Part 2, which I didn't particularly care for, Animal Crossing, which I think is fun, Doom Eternal, which I think is great, but just a lot more mainstream titles are getting noticed. And a game like Nioh, it's like, okay, best action game. It's like, well, how much have people really been exposed to how much you can do? And I think that's one thing that Team Ninja or Koei Tecmo or whoever's responsible for marketing this game, that's something they could certainly improve upon. And that's not even just a gameplay thing. I think they could do simple things like dropping a trailer a week or two in advance from the actual release date, doing more showcases like they did with the Claws, because one of the most one of the best ways to just show how awesome this game is to just show the awesome shit that's in this game. Things like Yokai Shift look really cool and are really awesome to see. I think players seeing the claws footage, which was now over a month back, I think like a month and a half ago now. I think when players saw the claws footage, which again, invested players had to take their time to figure out where to find this footage. All right, whether it was Tokyo Game Show or IGN's whatnot, follow up there. But players had to go out of their way to figure out where the stuff was. But for those that did put themselves out there and did see the footage, pretty much everyone was blown away. I know in the Discord that we have, the Nioh community Discord, there was so much talk about its potential. We were speculating on how it seemed to gain stacks, which it does via the whole concept of, what is it, unbroken. Basically, the more different skills you do and you chain together with the claws, the more your damage will increase. And so they saw that, and then they saw just generally the cool moves. You get to see abilities like battering ram, which just fling your target away. You got to see just a competent player showcasing his new weapon in an exciting way. I was even surprised that they actually were going for limitless finishers on both Benkei and many other enemies too. And then we got to see the grapple, and you get to see all these really cool things, all these really diverse things. And pretty much the response to the weapon was, holy shit, I want to play with it right now. All right, that got people hyped beyond belief. So I was really happy about that. And I just wish they extended similar things to the entirety of Nioh, just to show what this game really can be. And I think that's the biggest thing I think Team Ninja is missing out on. If they just put a little bit more effort in that regard, I think this game could potentially get closer to the mainstream. Maybe not as mainstream as, say, FIFA or Fortnite, but again, it's not trying to do that. But I'm saying sharing the same spotlight as a game like Dark Souls, because now Dark Souls has the whole term that everyone compares it to with, oh, it's a Souls-like. I'm like, okay, well, at least that game is known, and FromSoft is known. But I definitely feel Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo definitely deserve spotlight for this game. That's what I want to say about that.
Definitely. Since it has been 2 weeks that I have shifted to a new location, so I have been out of the loop for myself touching the game. So in terms of the breaks that I have been frequenting out, going into other people's streams and trying to give them specifically new players who have just joined the game, who are learning the mechanics, and they're trying to figure out how the combat system works. So I've been giving them tips, but the thing is that most of the new players who are coming into the franchise itself, they are terming themselves as Souls players, which is very hard to tell them that okay, Nioh has certain aspects which borrows from Souls, but in terms of technicality, combat aspects, in terms of number of skills that you can perform, how the stance switching works out, it gets overbearing for them, because as a person who has given 600 plus hours, who is well versed in how the combat system actually works out fluidly, it's kind of disheartening to see most of the players just reject the idea that it can be played differently. I think Nioh should have had a tutorial or something like that that incentivized new players to use those mechanics fluidly and understand how they get to figure out stuff like, okay, I have my sword, I have a specific ability called kick, which doesn't mentions at all that it does key damage. That's the biggest thing that new players don't at all. Skills not only do damage but also does about breaking guards and destroying keys. So new players, when they are figuring this out, okay, I have to use certain combo enders or skills to get the enemy's keys get depleted. They're not used to this fact. They're used to the fact that it's a Souls game. So it's mostly about getting in, getting about couple of hits, and then backing off. The keepers mechanic, I think Team Ninja could have expanded upon than just a tutorial saying that, oh, here it is, here's how you purify the yokai realm, and that's it. So in that regard, I'm quite not happy with how they have incentivized players to actually utilize that system and make it onto the player to have that system get engaged. That's my point.
I agree. I've one of the things I've been saying, whether it's in the suggestions document that we worked on, or just literally anything else, is just that the new player experience can be very obtuse. It can be very confusing, and as you said, most people will come to this game thinking, "Oh, hey, it's another Souls-like." And in Souls, there is no key pulse. There's no need to change stance. Like, okay, maybe you're playing Bloodborne and you can change your weapon because every weapon's a trick weapon. So you can change how it appears, but basically it's dodge and attack and like dodge and attack and maybe go for a parry every now and then. But approaching the game differently is certainly not an option if you are pigeonholed into thinking it's a Souls-like. And so they can miss out on lots of things. Now, one thing that, and I totally agree with you, Pont, is that they should do more targeted tutorials. I think the way the game is presented in the beginning is just, you don't know what to do. It's not a matter of things are necessarily difficult to understand. It's not so much things are difficult, it's more of I have literally no idea what to do. And then the game gives you kind of a very basic tutorial, and so what happens is, at least from my perspective, a player may not know what to do, where to turn to, and they don't want to really read like a million things. So what they'll do is look online for a guide, and then of course content creators, the more popular ones, will get more attention anyway. And what seems to be the trend on YouTube for Nioh is basically, alright, what's the build? What's the build I'm gonna do? And that further cements how a player is going to evaluate the game. And it's just, and that's kind of what's happened. You've got many YouTube channels that just have build videos and be like, all right, here's how you deal with the game. This is how you deal with the game. Look at this really powerful character. And so it's kind of a self-reinforcing loop. And so then they miss out on all sorts of things like being able to do flux. Like, I didn't actually know how to flux for the longest time. I didn't even know Flux 2. I didn't fully understand Flux 2 until the Nioh 2 Alpha. And that's from someone who's played the game so much. Like, I didn't know, oh, this is what Flux 2 is. I actually fully learned Flux 2. I actually had to remake my Flux 2 video that I have now on my YouTube channel because I was wrong about it when I was making it. Because if we look at the text here, so Flux, it says, changing to another stance on a successful key pulse increases the amount of key recovered. All right, so that's pretty clear. You get some extra key back if you switch stances on a key pulse. And then Flux 2, it says increases key recovery when you switch stances during Flux. So it's like, what does this mean? I actually thought it was referring to key recovery speed. All right, that's what I thought it was for the longest time. So not only do you get a flat amount of key, but you also get a key recovery speed buff. That's not the case. Flux 2 basically means you get 2 flat bonuses to your key. So whenever you can do Flux, just try to do Flux 2. And it's a little weird on the inputs, but it's just kind of confusing. Basically, you should have said, if you switch to 2 different stances, you get double the bonuses. It should just be, that's why players actually called it double Flux, because double Flux implies you're doing Flux 1 twice, which is much more accurate than, say, Flux 2. So it's things like that which make it difficult for players to understand. And if I'm having trouble understanding it with the amount of time that I put into it, how can I expect someone who's brand new to the game to even understand it at all?
Yeah, that is one of the things that Nioh doesn't justify or incentivizes players to get creative or how should I say, get more engaged with the combat system. Because most of the players the specific new players, not even new players, players who have reached region 4, region 5, they just tend to stick with one stance and prioritize the combo enders. Specifically, like for example, if someone has taken spear as their primary weapon, they will go in, get piercing rain, and then get out. So there's a lack of engagement in the sense that, oh, after piercing rain you can do flux 2 or get out of it with a low stance dodge in the pre-switch animation. That is very specific to spear, which I'll be coming to the next point of it. So what I'm trying to say is that players don't understand the utility that the game provides. They go for all the buffs that game gives in terms of magic talismans, specifically for ninjutsu, because all the new players, they tend to get intimidated by how the combat works, so they tend to stick with the easier route that is mostly towards magic and ninjutsu side of things. So that's my take on it. I think players need to not they need to get how should I say, an understanding from not just people who are watching them, but from their own creative minds, that how I can make this combat system for me palatable enough that I can term this off as its own thing rather than just saying that it's a Souls game. Now,
Right,
regarding
I
the
totally agree.
yeah, so I have a gripe with the specific weapon that I want to inculcate on.
Sure.
Um,
Which weapon?
there are two weapons in the game, the sword and the spear. Like, for people who know about the combat system, they would notice that the sword and the spear has that little extended side dodge that only those two weapons have. So I'm kind of like disappointed that why isn't that kind of dodge given to other weapons in their toolkits. Like, for example, we have dual swords with mind's eye, we have tonfas with low stance, prescience, evasion. Both of them work as almost as same similar, but none of the other weapons, they get to have the benefit of what katana and spear have. So most of the players, specific not just players but me also, tend to stick with katana spear because of just that particular skill. Not just skill, that one extra advantage of dodging in that low stance to get me with a further invincibility frames. So I think I think Team Ninja missed an opportunity to give that kind of flexibility to other weapons also.
It is pretty surprising. There are a lot of things that, even for, I guess, players who've dumped thousands of hours, we notice a lot of inconsistencies. So we always joke about how Nioh and consistency don't really go hand in hand. So as you just said, the little pirouette that you do in low stance for sword when you dodge, or even with the spear, that doesn't apply to any other weapon. So it's just strange, and it makes you wonder, why is this the case? Now, my speculation is that they pretty much didn't have, I think back when they originally coded this, they probably only had sword and spear as main weapons, and then maybe like an axe or something. And then I think they added weapons later after the fact. And you can kind of see how the toolkits, at least from Nioh 1, sword and spear were the most fleshed out. So I actually played those two the most, and then I started playing Odachi. I didn't actually like playing any of the other weapons for that same reason. I just felt like, hey, there just isn't as much as I can do with these weapons as I can do with the sword and the spear. Fortunately, in Nioh 2, other weapons are much more fleshed out. I think players feel that way when it comes to certainly with the claws. The claws has a very fleshed out toolkit, and I think just the nature of Unbroken being able to chain things has just added so much flexibility and so much replay value that it's hard to drop it. I think pretty much anyone who's picked up the claws really likes it, and they have a lot of fun with it. What's surprising about the weapon too is that it has, in my opinion, a low skill floor, so pretty much anyone could pick it up and play it, but it's very obvious to me if someone can play it really well versus when they can't. So it's a very high skill ceiling with a low skill floor. This is different from, say, weapons like the split staff. The split staff doesn't have, in my opinion, nearly as high as a skill ceiling, but it's also a little more difficult for players to work with, and it's just interesting in that regard. But yeah, it's nice when you have weapons that do really unique things, and it's really nice when they do a lot of various things, but a lot of that gets clouded by the fact that, one, you may not be aware that there are these differences, and the game certainly doesn't help matter, and second, there's just a lot of things that can feel inconsistent. I do hope a lot of those get rectified. Some of them are more important than others, all things considered. A lot of things, I think, if I'm to be honest, the dodge stuff for sword and spear, while I'd like that to be perhaps normalized to every other weapon, I certainly think that's on the smaller scale. It would be nice in the same way, which I know Payne, you, myself, and many others are hoping that certain weapon switch things are consistent. Like, for example, if you do a flash attack from, say, sword to the spear, you'll notice that there's kind of like this weird pause that doesn't exist for other weapons. It's like little things like that we're going to pick apart, but it's not necessarily as big picture as some of the concerns I think the overall player base has. I think the player base in general, bottom line, wants more active skills. And my hope, and I keep saying this because it's a hope, all right, it's a hope, don't judge. My hope is that every single node that you see that hasn't been filled out here gets filled out. Not necessarily with passives, but with active skills. I think, and I keep saying this because it's just something that I really want. I would ideally like the weapon like dual swords to get as much variety, aside from parries, as, say, weapons like the sword have.
Definitely.
You know,
Definitely.
we got to see abilities like Severing Spin. Tell me your impressions of Severing Spin the first time you saw it for the sword, or learning that it was an ability you can actually use that costs ki, not anima, just a normal ability you can use.
I found Severing Spin to be quite jarring at first because the hitbox of the attack itself covers a very wide radius, and as a katana user, you're not used to that radius that the skill provides. The radius that's very close to it is the sword key explosion with the follow up to it. But that's the shorter range of what Severing Spin actually does. Um, in terms of flashiness, that definitely gives the impact of the sword. But the thing is, sword has gotten so many upgrades added on in Nioh 2 that other weapons usually tend to miss out. And specifically boss skills. Yeah, I want to come into the topic of boss skills because grinding those boss skills has been a real shitty time for majority of
Yeah, it
the players.
has.
For once, I would like to. I don't know if it's possible to change at this time in the development stage, but as something that we as players usually do, there's a particular stat sheet on every boss that says times defeated into 1, times defeated into 3, times defeated into 5. That is, I think, the dominator. What do you call?
You're talking about the titles, right? Where it tells you how many times you beat them, right?
Yeah. I would have liked that skills would be dropped with the benefit of, okay, you defeated this boss 5 times. Okay, now you are getting this skill guaranteed, no matter what luck you are currently using off. In fact, there is a particular skill in Yokai. I think it's in the Yokai shuffling skill tree that states that 5%, if you defeat the enemy with this particular skill, there's an arcana on that says 5% of that particular skill will have a boosted luck on defeating the enemies with a boosted item rate drop. So I think that's very shitty in terms of how the developers have made uh, hidden skills being dropped off. Because as from many players, specifically you, that I have seen 100 fights against Maeda Toshie to get that
Oh
triple
god.
threat. It's grueling. And me specifically, I have never. In fact, I haven't grinded the hidden boss skills from Mumio, the 2 switchglaive hidden skills, because I can't be bothered to do that. In fact, I've been very lucky to get hidden skills just on my regular play, because if I try to grind it, I know for a fact that I'll not be having a good time. So that's one aspect that I hope in the next DLC they will address it. If not, then shit. I have to do this so many times. That's one. Yeah.
Oh, I totally see that. It's still frustrating that we have to grind so much just for things that are, I guess, hidden skills. I don't mind some grind, but I certainly think that it could be a lot better. I think
Also,
that your
also,
suggestion of a... Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Also, fact when we are in Yokai Shift, we are able to change stances for some reason, but there are no added skills to use in that Yokai Shift to further complement the particular powered up state that we can get. So I I think Team Ninja should look into this and add a skill dump where even in Yokai Shift we can use certain skills that we can do. For example, any form that you pick up, apart from Brute, which has one very specific ability that parries, Phantom and Feral they don't have skills assigned to them. In fact, that uh, when I came to Nioh 2, I remember in Nioh 1 that when you go into a level living weapon, the living weapon state had you automatically in the mid stance position fixed. So whatever skill you had in the mid stance, you were able to do it. However, in Neo 2 with the Yokai Shift, that's not possible. Even the Sohaya Maru skills that we get from the bosses defeated, I don't think we can use that. So if it's not asking for much, but then I think a lot of players they crave for added what do you call flexibility for using that particular yokai shift powered up.
Right.
Hello.
Uh, right. I see your point, and that's something I'd like to. I think on top of just having the hidden skill grind be much better overall, just much less, because no one likes fighting the exact same thing 100 times to get a skill. All right, that's just painful. On top of that, I think having a more flushed out yokai shift mechanic would be healthy. I certainly like things like the Brute's Fang Break, as you can see here. It's it's awesome. It's very satisfying to pull off. And yeah, the other things have some skills, but they're really not as impactful as say as Fang Break was. I think Feral, the fact that it has the Shadow Step, which you can follow up with a Shadow Stab, yeah, that's kind of cool, and you can play evasively, but the core moveset otherwise just feels pretty whatever. There is no difference between what stance you're in. You're pretty much just stuck with it. So I kind of do hope for an expansion upon shifting mechanics. I think that will be the case. But if they don't do it, they kind of really missed a major mark, because one of the criticisms, aside from the lack of power with Yokai Shift, is just that there just isn't that much to do. At the very least with Living Weapon, you had a bunch of different ways you could interact with it. Basically, it changed depending on what weapon you had. So if you had, say, an axe, you had a different moveset. If you had a Kusarigama, you had a different moveset. You could actually use some active skills, at least in mid-stance. And so it added a nice sense of variety to it. But Yokai Shift has really dialed down those elements of variety. And so as a result, I think it's hurting quite a lot. Would you say that's something you'd agree with?
Yeah, definitely. Because uh, I think it was a good step from Team Ninja to actually nerf Yokai Shift because
Okay.
it was the meta in the first game with the living weapon builds clearing abysses, not even abyss, even in the first difficulty itself. I would see players just pop on living weapon and just mash the way and see the damage numbers back and win the fight, which is acceptable in the fact that okay, you can do that, but it was very overpowering. Now in this particular game, the fact that you don't have that much damage uh, stacked up you're in the yokai shift as compared to the living weapon state in the first game certainly helps because the player then is forced to actually learn the fight and not get too crazy mashing with in the living weapon state. And plus, it's also adds to a complexity of the fights that okay in yokai shift state you are guaranteed a yokai grapple if you are able to do a burst counter if the enemy uh, has succumbed into a red key empty red key state. So I think that's a good decision, but then they had a missed opportunity with fleshing out the possibilities that we as players could expand upon it.
I agree. I really hope that DLC 3 introduces many more mechanics for Shiftling. I really, really do. On top of just whatever else. I would ideally like to use Yokai Shift just normally. Right now, I pretty much just don't. I'll just wait. I'll have my gauge fill up so that I get certain gauge bonuses, and I just never will use Yokai Shift unless I go for a fancy finish on an enemy. Like, that's pretty much it. I'll jokingly activate the Brute Yokai Shift form so that I can do the grapple, which I will call Chicken Bone. Thank you, Kage, for that. So I'll do a Chicken Bone, and then if I don't kill the enemy, I'll go for a Fang Break. And like, that's pretty much it. But in regards to it being part of normal gameplay, even as a surge of like burst power and whatnot, I just don't use it because it's just fundamentally not as interesting. And I hope it becomes interesting because by all means, the ideas that they have are straight up amazing. I mean, Yokai Shift as a concept is awesome. And I just hope that it gets fleshed out. Even the new skills that they've added are amazing. So the sword, of course, with Severing Spin, and I know I've mentioned this many times, but this really just opens up so many different possibilities if they're willing to go this route with weapons. Can you imagine similar types of abilities or just similar abilities that embrace this type of creativity being applied to like everything else? Like, holy cow, I didn't expect the sword to have this massive area of effect ability that hits everything around me. Like, that's crazy.
Sword is unfortunately getting all the love for adding new skills to it, whereas certain weapons, like I should mention axe, where are the multiple added skills for axe? I don't see block plus light combinations for it. Like, even I don't play axe, but then I recognize the fact that it's not getting that much attention as compared to other weapons, which is unfortunate. And I'm not a axe hater, but then the fact that it has very limited toolkits to play with certainly not helps its case.
Right, of course. It is a very powerful weapon, and I actually find it fun time to time, but as you said, it doesn't have the same interesting factor. It got a grand total of like 2 moves. Southpaw, which, okay, that's fine. I'm happy for it, and then Spirit Storm, which, sure, I guess, but it's just not as interesting. It's not as interesting as Severing Spin whatsoever. It's not as interesting as really let's look at Claws again. Claws got Tiger Claws. All right, straight up Ninja Gaiden move. Okay, I didn't expect this to be a normal thing. Like, what? That and Severing Spin completely changes the possibilities that are welcomed in a game like this. And I think, and I kind of want to bring this to another point. I know many players are going to be critical of AI, myself included, but
even I am that. I'll get into the topic of AI because I have certain points that I want to state out from my personal experience, but please carry on.
Sure. So in my podcast with Sooth, I was complaining about dojo bosses mostly, right? And he basically is of the opinion, well, they're bosses, they can do whatever the hell they want. That's just what they are. I'm like, okay, fine. Now, I had advocated in the past for nerfs to Saito Toshimitsu because of X, Y, or Z problems, and that's like a whole 10-hour discussion.
God.
Right?
Oh, that guy, fuck.
I know, right? Fuck it, right? But what? Okay, so then it occurred to me there's another way to address Saito Toshimitsu besides nerfing him, right? Nerfs, of course, in general don't feel that great compared to buffs. And then when I saw Tiger Claws, it kind of just dawned on me that, well, what if they just gave you answers to all of that? Oh, all the backdashing that I dislike from enemies. What if I had some way to deal with that on every weapon so that, well, technically speaking, I can address this, and maybe it's not ideally where I like everything to be, but I still have an option that doesn't make it feel like the enemy is completely controlling the pace of the fight, where it feels like I have an option to be aggressive. And when I saw the ability Tiger Claws, one, I was blown away. I'm like, this is crazy. All right, this is just a thing they're giving us from Ninja Gaiden. All right, Azuna dropped great and all, but this was insane. I'm like, wait, I can literally never have to worry about backdashers again. I'm like, this, like, that's crazy. So what if other weapons got similar tools? Maybe not exactly the same way. You can have every weapon kind of have their own specific niche and whatnot. But what if other weapons got more dynamic tools to deal with these situations that we perceive as unfair, as bullshit and whatnot? And it would certainly make it a much more engaging experience than, say, homogenizing every single enemy so that every human boss is just a glorified Revenant. And I think that is a far more interesting space to explore in terms of just, hey, let's give the player more tools, buff the player in a way that rewards their skill. Let's do that as opposed to straight up just nerfing everything. How do you feel about that?
I still think that Nioh 2 humans AIs have been tweaked from the first game. I don't know. From my personal experience that I've fought humans in this game, I've been kind of pissed off because for one reason, the block hit stun that they do. So I'm a Tonfa user. Mostly I use Tonfa and dual swords to pressurize humans, specifically when they go into the block state. And because of the fact that we don't have parry disabled yet, which I want to advocate for it, because all I'm seeing on humans from my point of view that we are just doing skills to break their ki and their guard. Right. So for example, as a Tonfa user, I go into Demon Dance, I do shove, I do what do you call block plus the triangle enders, not the triangle, the skills, mountain breakers, focus strike. So these are primarily skills that are guaranteed that they will not deflect. But the fact that the human AI have been tweaked into such extent that a single hit in a normal string that I'll inflict upon, and suddenly they go into a guard. So the next attack of hit strings that I try to pressure on them gets blocked. And immediately, I don't know whether they have been tweaked in such a way that immediately upon getting hit, they'll instantly attack you. For example, let's say there's this human boss, Imagawa. In the first stage, the Elephant Man. He had a burst counter. In the lower difficulties, that was a very wide radius that he can do, and he could do immediately when he's being pressurized. Now in the later difficulties, that burst counter element has been removed. So most of the times that I'm trying to pressure him, he's just getting out that particular attack, which either most of the time I'll have to go back and dash away, which I think is little obnoxious, because if I have a human AI in a hit string, he shouldn't be able to instantly hyper armor his way through me. Even though I have toughness A that is going above 200, I should be able to get him to do that. But I don't know. The humans have been, it's been changed in a very subtle way that makes the players, specifically technical players who are getting into destroying and crushing guards, specifically with tonfas and claws, because most of these two weapons have the highest number of skills that can go undeflected. As Parry Disabled mentioned, I'm an advocate for that, because I want to pressurize them in a normal hit string rather than specializing in skills that I feel gets stale because I'll I'll try to do a couple of combinations and see how will that pan out. But then most of the time I get into a state where I'm getting pushed off or they are hyper armoring. So I don't know. Regarding humans, I've been kind of iffy about it.
I think when it
Hello?
comes to humans, now that I've had this talk a few times, I think it's actually pretty difficult, all things considered, to really find that nice middle ground for many human opponents. Because as I was in Nioh 1, as you may recall, whenever we tried to pressure human opponents, all they would do is block, and that's pretty much all they would ever do. And so it was pretty much just, all right, they're just a punching bag except they block, and then you do your zero key combos, and then you keep them in that state. And there's pretty much nothing that they could do about it, which was oddly enough the reason why I enjoyed some of the more living weapon fights. So Sanada Yukimura, who of course was one of the most anime bosses, given the fact that he could fly, was enjoyable simply because there was a degree of interaction that I could have with him. Was he challenging? Absolutely. But I never, overall, minus a few things, he was well done. Whereas, say, bosses like Date Masamune, he wasn't nearly as fun, even though he was living weapon, because he had certain mechanics that just felt like they punished the player from doing anything. And I think now with Nioh 2, I have noticed a subtle difference in AI. What seems to be the case is that the AI will pretty much, no matter what, attack you after a certain pause in your gameplay, no matter like what weapon it is. So you have to be mindful of that, which I think is a good thing. And I think just the way that a lot of us Nioh 1 players are used to the game, it can just be very jarring because we're not expecting an enemy to attack us mid-attack string. We assume, hey, they're going to block for a bit longer. And it's tricky to find a way so that there's almost like this ebb and flow when it comes to combat. I don't want my enemies to be punching bags, and I don't want enemies to turn me into punching bags. And I think, oddly enough, one of the better examples of opponents, I'm not saying he's the best, but I think human Tokushiro, so I'll bring him up for anybody who doesn't remember what he looks like, which I highly doubt. But I think human Tokushiro is actually one of the better ones for that reason.
I agree. I agree.
Simply because he has a built-in mechanic, and there is counterplay involved with it. Let's say you get too carried away on attacking him, and he decides, hey, you know what? I've had enough of this. Let me throw out my parry thing, and you'll know because it'll sound like a charged attack. And if you attack, let's say you mess up an attack, you still have a brief amount of time to deal with it. You can dodge away from it. Is that difficult? Yes, but it's something you can always do, and then you can continue some pressure afterwards. I think that's a better way to interact with it. Basically, it's punishing you for doing the exact same thing over and over again. And this even applies to the yokai form that he has. And, when he's basically readying himself for a strike, or he's readying himself for whatever. And you can still work with it, but it's just, I find that much more engaging than just say, all right, all of a sudden an enemy goes 0 to 100 like they do an attack that I can't react to. I think the biggest issue is just the ability to be able to react, and from the player's perspective, and I think from the AI's perspective, it would be ideal if it wasn't as jarring as going from a state of, say, doing nothing to all of a sudden doing everything all at once. And I actually think Tokushiro is a great example, the yokai version, of both. Because, as I said, I think his way of dealing with excess pressure is at least interesting. And I'm fine with that. Because there's some counterplay, there is skill that you can use to get above it. But I also think he exemplifies one of the weird things with Nioh AI in general. So this doesn't apply to yokai as much as it does with humans. So with a lot of humans, there's like this weird staring contest, and Yokai Tokushiro is the best. He just like walks around and you're like, I guess I attack, but I don't know how long. And all of a sudden he just does like 500 attacks all at once. And then there's just like this weird awkward pause where he's just walking around, and then he'll start sequencing certain attacks and whatnot. So it just feels artificially turn-based. I don't know how else to put it, but
Speaking
I
of,
think,
yeah,
yeah, please.
Yeah, speaking of Tokichiro, I just something came in my mind regarding both Tokichiro and Imagawa's particular guard-based parry stance that they do. For some reason, I don't know if people are aware of this, but Switchglaive skills are considered as strong attacks. Like, I'll throw a particular skill when they're doing that particular stance and I'll get parried. Like, why is a skill considered as a strong for any for that matter? Because it's a skill, shouldn't get parried. And I've had a couple of conversations with other Switchglaive players, and they say that it's the same case for them. I don't know if it's a bug or it's an intentional bug or something, but I'm pretty sure other players who have done the Imagawa and Tokichiro fights with Switchglaive, and when they try to do a skill from Switchglaive into that parry stance. For example, I'm doing a normal combo and I switch stance to high in that parry stance and I get parried. Like that pisses me off. That why is this a thing specifically for that weapon that I'm using off?
It
I
is
don't know if
strange. I wanted to touch base on that because I recognize what you mean. So it doesn't just apply to Switchglaive, it applies to even some attacks from the sword, many different things from the split staff. It's not exactly clear what's going on, but I think, as you said, many attacks are registered. Even though they're considered skills, they're active skills that you perform, the game seems to register properties of them as strong attacks, just basic attacks. So, for example, if you try Kurama Sword Dance, the first and last hits, I think, can be parried, which is weird.
Okay. This is
Yeah,
new to
it's
me.
weird.
This is very new to me.
If you try sword key is fine. Sword of celerity, the follow up, can get parried. I've had it happen many times. It's very strange.
Okay.
Yeah, you can even do. I actually saw this on Sood's stream the other day. Southpaw can be parried too. He actually.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so Sood actually performed the new axe parry Spirit Storm. You know, the one where you just like reflect. You basically swing the axe around as a parry. He did that on Sakata Kintoki's Southpaw, and I was like, what the hell? I don't understand how that's the case. So it's again kind of harkens back to the sense that Nioh feels inconsistent at times, which can make just learning it a little bit more difficult. But yeah, so you could try that. You could try Split Staff, and it's pretty crazy. I know I'm almost certain that anything that is like a key damage ability, just like a key damage skill, that pretty much I don't think ever really can be parried. But if there's a part of that skill that involves some strong attack properties as registered by the game.
Yeah. The first normal hit strings, like say for example, the sword's kick. In order to do the kick, you have to have a one normal hit string to come out. Like
Right.
those are the requirements that I think you are trying to say, that those are the normal hit strings that are applicable for the enemy AI to get it parried. That's what I'm
Normally,
coming
yes,
into it.
and that's kind of what you expect from parries in general. But I'm talking about that even certain abilities, the game treats them as just normal basic attacks, and so they will get parried. Like, again, it was very surprising to me that, the initial hit of Kurama Sword Dance where you just swing your sword down, I've had that been blocked and parried. I'm like, what the hell? I didn't expect that. And of course, Sword of Celerity was a big surprise for me too. And it's just, how is a player supposed to know this? You assume active skills are put into one category, you assume basic attacks are put into another category. So it can be confusing. But despite that, the game's still great, but these are just like little things that kind of get annoying.
There's another pet peeve of mine regarding to inconsistent AI. The Revenants with scrolls. What the fuck? What the actual fuck? Like
Revenants.
normal, yeah, Revenants specifically with scrolls. Like I fought Revenants who were light armor. They have hyper armor through my skills. My skills, not even normal hit strings. They have hyper armored through skills. I'm like, what the fuck? How the fuck have they designed this particular AI to deal with this shit? I don't understand it. That's why I barely go towards revenants who have this course because it feels cheap that you're you're in a hit string on them, you're applying pressure on them, and suddenly they're hyper armoring you, no matter what armor category they are wearing off. That feels very bad.
It is a bit weird. I'm not gonna lie. I think when it comes to developing the exact AI for this, it's again probably really tricky because finding that middle ground, I don't even know what it would be. I mean, they've certainly put out ideas and they've certainly implemented certain things that I like and I think are better. I'm actually okay with, for example, Maeda doing Bracing Breeze all of a sudden. It's pretty telegraphed. And, if you let off, he's like, okay, well, you're going to attack me again, then you're going to get punished. And even then, if he does pull it off, you still have a brief window of opportunity to counterplay it. But that's much more dynamic than, say, like all of a sudden, as you're saying, a Revenant just like does a skill and you're like, well, I can't react to it. How am I supposed to be able to anticipate this, let alone react to it? So I don't know the best way to deal with it, but in all honesty, I think that's probably why they've shifted the game much more to yokai, because one, it allows them to explore much more interesting boss mechanics, and it's just kind of the theme they want to go for too. It just works hand in hand. I would say almost all the yokai bosses are really well done. I don't really have the same concerns. You kind of know what to expect. Yokai bosses will pretty much just, they'll do whatever the hell they want. You have to play around them. And that's just kind of the expectations that's been set with every single yokai. You get them out of key, you get a brief amount of punish with yokai bosses. If you want to punish them as hard as possible when they're out of keys before they shift to Dark Realm. And so there's kind of this expectation that's set. But with humans, since they don't have that, it's a little different. What's strange to me is that I actually prefer the living weapon human fights over anybody else. I actually prefer Raiko. So the new DLC 2 human boss, the first one you fight, I actually prefer fighting her in her living weapon form than anything else, simply because I guess there's just this new expectation that's set, and I'm not particularly, I guess, worried about things like, I'm just not worried about the same things I'm worried about when I fight normal humans. I know, okay, she is going to be doing this at all times. So I guess there's some level of consistency that's around it as well. And of course, her living weapon fight is just beautiful to look at. The variations of moves that she has is crazy. And it's like one of those bosses that I just wish I could do literally everything that she does. I'm like, holy shit, I want to be able to do that cool grapple. I want to be able to do this. I want to get more moves from her. I want to be able to do her version of this. She's just an exciting boss in that realm. So strangely enough, living weapon bosses are much more much more interesting to me than just traditional cookie cutter Revenant like bosses.
Yeah. Speaking of living weapon bosses, image came into mind. There's a particular loop. There was this spear guy in Nioh 1. He was a Shima Sakon, I think he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shima
That's what you're
Sakon.
talking about.
I had no idea that you could loop him. I saw it on your fights way back. And before the loop, I thought he was one of the more bullshit kind of living weapon users. But then I saw the loop, I was like, fuck, okay. This completely nullifies him. Which I'm coming into the next point of my, not a rant, but what I want to say is that I'm very glad that they have nerfed the loops, the EI quick draw loops when you perform the humans. Let's say, for example, you get a human down to 0 key, you do an EI loop, you do an EI quick draw from behind, and he'll get up, you do the attack, he'll go on the ground, and you'll just loop him to that. I'm very glad that they removed it completely, because that was one of the things that I was very interested in doing it, but I also felt that it was very stale for me in terms of engagement. So I'm very thankful for Team India to actually remove that particular loop. I'm sure that certain players would be pissed off that it's not in the game, but then I get to have more engagement in the fights. Now, speaking of humans with living weapons, um, I still not have mastered Raiko because of the fact that I've not have enough time on my hands to play against her. I think the DLC, the second DLC boss Raiko, for me it has felt quite a jump in difficulty in the fact that there's very few downtime between her attacks. Like if you get what I mean, like she'll
Yeah, I
do
do.
a preset amount of attacks that she'll do. If you dodge too far away from that particular attack, and when you try to go aggressive, then she'll instantly go into a next chain of attacks that you have to be very cognitive of. Where how you will do it. With overtime, I'm pretty sure that I can get her down to fully know where to dodge, what to block, like what we had to do in Nioh 1, specifically that one particular boss. Um, what's it called? The centipede guy.
Oh yeah.
He was a fun boss for me because he had very certain what do you call attack patterns that if you knew where to dodge and how to dodge it, it becomes a very engagement fight. Uh, yeah, I'll say that the living weapon users in Neo 2 have been pretty good, but then there are certain yokai bosses that they have introduced that I am not particularly happy with it. Specifically, Giant Toad. That motherfucker,
Okay.
yeah, that motherfucker. Sorry for my language, but
No.
he pisses me off because of
Explain.
the
I want to
fact,
know.
yeah, now apart from being a fat ass, he has also gotten the ability to channel Naruto jutsus that tracks. First of all, his fireball tracks. He throws out the paralysis bombs from far. And I'm not a brute user, I'm a feral user. So to get the burst counter of him is very hard as a feral and even as a what do you call the phantom user because for some players who have stuck with one particular type of spirit go against the game, I find it's very inconvenient in order to actually approach the fight because I'm in a disability. If I'm a phantom user, I cannot go up against his burst counters, which are mostly towards his ninjutsu side that doesn't attack on his hitbox. So that's one thing that I'm very not happy about it because the players don't have the full toolkit to deal with it. Like for example, Nioh, his burst counter that he jumps off from a waterfall. If you're good enough with your timing, you can shut it down with brute. And if you're almost okay with your timing, you can shut it down with feral and phantom. All three of them are viable. However, with giant toads burst counters, um, I haven't seen other players use feral or even phantom to counter it. So that kinds
So
of limits. Yeah, that is
you okay?
one.
So
That
you're
is
I actually, believe it or not, I've actually stuck most of the time with Phantom against Toad. So you're talking about when he stabs a spear into the ground and then he casts all the crazy ninjutsu, right? That's burst
yeah,
attack.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
Phantom that. I have Phantomed it.
Okay, so I'm not aware of that particular scenario.
It's
Um,
it's surprising, but overall, I see what you mean though. It's
yes,
again
yeah,
with
he
bosses like
has.
that. You want to go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I want to say on Toad is that he has gotten a lot of attacks that chain into projectiles, into jutsus, into specific amount of hitboxes that cover a wide area of radius, and he constantly does it in a split second. So the time to be aggressive on him on my side has been very low in terms of engagement. So that's why I don't know. It might be my inexperience with him, but for the first few counters I had to deal with Toad, I felt in a very disadvantageous state. And not to mention the biggest. What should I say about her? Yomi, Lightning Yomi. Oh my fucking god! As a player, I'm very uh, averse to using buffs on my side. I tend to go with quick change and extraction and proceed with the fight. But Yomi, I don't know, I had to use lightning stop talismans and Daujin Saki in order to counteract her. Something about that boss is very irritating. How do I explain it? The key
I'll
regain
explain
that
it.
she gets. Yeah, please go ahead because you have much experience about it.
So so Lightning Gods of Yomi is naturally a very frustrating boss, but simply because she can inflict the lightning status. If you get hit, you pretty much get the lightning status, and it seems that there's no amount of diminishing returns, as well as the duration for lightning is very, very long. Much longer than players would like, myself included. But in terms of her design and her attacks, I think they're all pretty fair. It just sucks to get slowed down. But I think, and I'm pretty sure that the developers were aware of this, and as a result made the boss fight actually overall slow. Her move set, I think it's overall really slow and very telegraphed. It's just painful when you're slowed down as well. But if you are able to evade her and deal with her attacks, which of course is easier said than done, then she's overall a very simple fight. As you can see here on the screen, if you knock one of those skulls down, if you hit them, you stagger her for a good amount of time, and it hurts her ki. So I think she's well designed. Frustrating? Absolutely. Oh my god, the amount of times where I was just raging because I couldn't move because they got slowed down, and then she'd do lightning attacks, and I'm like desperate to try to avoid them. Yeah, I hated that. But I think in terms of design, I think she's well done. That's what I want to say on that fact. I suck at her, and I pretty much resort to really cheap shit to deal with her, but I know that if I was good enough, I would be able to avoid the lightning attacks and be able to destroy her. That's how I see it. Do I have any personal hopes for the fight? Yeah, I do hope that lightning accumulation isn't as terrible as it is. Maybe it's like, hey, you need more lightning resistance or something. I don't know, but I totally understand the frustration. It's just, hey, you're slowed down for the entire fight. Good luck. You're
Good
like,
luck.
fuck
Good
me,
luck.
man.
And that fight has I don't that fight killed my hype for the DLC. It was great. It was great up till that particular point. And that soured me on the fact that they introduced a boss that has so much spam with a element that restricts your movement on a regular basis, which I hate about it. I don't like lightning. Nobody likes lightning because you have to wait for so much amount of seconds, or you have to have use an item to get rid of it. So, and speaking of the new enemies that they have introduced, one of the enemies, I think Yasha might be the contender for the category of Magatsu warrior from Nioh 1. Because
Yeah.
Nioh 1, because in Nioh 1, the Magatsu warriors were very intimidating in the sense that they had many attack patterns that could fuck you up if you didn't know how to prepare yourself. But in Neo 2, we have the yokai burst counters and yokai skills to counteract with them. The Magatsus have been tamed with these added benefits that the player toolkits have. But Yasha seems to be the new threat level that we as players wanted. Even the Kusarigama yokai, which were the apex of the threat levels in the first game, they have been nerfed real hard. In the sense that I feel the pain of Kage when he says that even he can blindfold kill them. So I'm very happy with the fact that we have an enemy like Yasha who has attack patterns that she can mix up. For example, there are these swings that detects hitboxes not just in front of her, but on the side and on the back of. Plus, she had got couple of attack patterns that come out real quick. So she's on a good threat level, and I'm happy to have an enemy that I can have my engagement on a good what do you call counterplay basis.
Yeah,
And
I really do like
apart from
Yasha too.
Yasha, yeah, apart from Yasha, there's this famous miscarriage that I like to term it. I think it was me who termed it in Zilot's chat.
Yeah,
The
you
famous
call it
miscarriage.
miscarriage, but my
Yeah,
wife
I call
calls
it
it fake
miscarriage.
taxi.
Oh my God, nice synonyms. Okay. I like the boss. I like the enemy and the attack patterns that it has, but couple of it seems very iffy for me. For example, when she's down with the Amrita being openly showed up that you can attack for it. I don't know if it's a trend with Nioh 2 with every enemies having wake up attacks being 360 around them. Many of the enemies that I've tend to fight against, I'm pretty much sure everyone has noticed that a lot of enemies in this particular game have properties where okay, you did a grapple on them, instantly 360 degrees attacks. I know the snake lady does. Um, who else does it? The Rokurokubi does the long necks, and that guy does the fat ass, the jiggly butt. He does that. So that is one trait of his boss pattern that I am not content with. And the second attack pattern that I'm very inexperienced with is a sudden burst of charge. I don't know. मतलब, I might be getting old or I might be being blind, but that charge comes real fast, like insanely fast.
It
I
is
don't
very
know about that.
fast.
It's very fast for me, and because of the fact that I've been playing in demon difficulty and I've gone to vice difficulty also, I get one shotted on. I don't. I my build has been like I've been inspired from you, Mr. Puffer. I've been inspired to have my stats all 56. And
Excellent.
I'll
Perfect.
yeah, yeah, 56 in all stat, the balanced build. And
Yes.
in terms of armor sets that I'm currently rolling in, um, I'm currently rolling in Benz and Magatsu, because Benz for me as being that set incentivizes me to use my skills effectively and variedly. Like for example, the new graces that have come in Vice, the Aklas, um, and which ones with it? The
I'm
ones which
using
had,
Ame no Uzume right now.
yeah. I think for me, damage is not an issue because I know I can play well. For me, damage has never been an issue. For me, I need to have toolkits and builds that can complement how I can play. So when the Benzitin Grace was introduced, and I was very happy with this set. I know a lot of players were happy with this set because it incentivized players to get varied in their toolkits and how they would approach their enemies and how they would get to have a dance with it. I don't know if the six-piece bonus has been reduced from 70% to 30%. I'm not up to date, but the fact that I have that kind of flexibility on my hands, I cannot go Amino Uze. Sorry, Amino head
Don't
dancer
worry
because
about the
I always get
name.
chipped. Yeah. I tend to get chipped in during dodges, doing block crushes. So that kind of power gain that usually players get from Aminuzi doesn't strike convenient for me. And there's the opposite of that grace set, the Akala's Grace, where you get a damage boost depending upon the number of hits you block. So I'm one of those players that do tend to block, but not in a block heavy kind of situation. Dodge, dodge, block, attack. For that playstyle, I've been very happy with my Benzitin Grace set. And another thing that I've been experiencing regarding how the key management system has been dealt with in this particular game. Um, Considering the fact that Nioh 2's key flux gains, even with the ultimate stats, have not been up to par with how it was in the first game. So I have to go towards the route of corruption weapons, like you have been. Earlier, I used to go with purity weapons because of the fact that I had key pulse on my blocks. So if I had to block, I was in the safe zone that yes, I have my key being regained. But because of the fact that I've seen a couple of players, including you and many others, use corruption weapons to go to the route of Neo 1's key pulse system, I think that has been a better course for my play style in terms of how I want to have my key management system have better. That's my point.
It does help. I am very grateful that DLC 2 introduced many new options that players basically can play however they want. I know just for the sake of exercise, I've been showing that my character, which I'll show on the screen, she's not by all means min-maxed at all. 63 in all stats, which I will literally take until I'll stop at 69 all stats. Okay, that's peak performance. But
yes,
as if you take a look at
goal,
exactly, that's my life goal. But as you can see with even my weapons, I don't really stack damage per se. If that is on there, it's unintentional. So my attack power, and you can see my stats once again, they're very weak compared to the average player. So I have melee attack powers of like 2400, at best 2500, and like that's it. And most players will easily have 3,000, sometimes will push to 4,000. So my power is very weak, but yet I'm able to get through the game because I have a lot of technical knowledge. And if someone played just in a reasonable fashion, they wouldn't have the same stats as I'm doing. They'd probably build more appropriately, put more damage-based things, and stack a lot of those things together just because it seems viable. And you can do that. And to even show how easy that is to do, I was showcasing in one of my YouTube videos, which for whatever reason has a bunch of views, I was showcasing the power of Death Dancer. Just that alone. That was the only change I made to my equipment, was that I started using Death Dancer, and it was like, okay, if I can keep this buff up, it really isn't too bad for me. And then if I can keep that up, I can destroy things like without any trouble. And so just to show how easy it is to access damage, I have been working on not only having Amin no Uzume's Grace for Death Dancer, but recently also adding the versatility buff via Susanoo's Grace. So I actually have all the pieces finally. But yeah, it's just like, okay, I can tack on versatility on top of Death Dancer, and then I was going to use it with the fists so that I could melt everything on +9, which was the case. I'm just not really having trouble when it comes to damage. And the +9 experience is not really, it's not like that different from base experience, except that enemies hit harder and take longer to kill. So it's just a sliding difficulty thing. And the game is really generous about this. If you build quote unquote perfectly, you can melt through the game without any trouble. Like, it's even easier to do that now than it was on demon difficulty. So I think the game is in a good spot, and at least allowing players many different options without worrying about falling off in terms of damage. So in my view, I'm very happy with all the build things that have been added, because they emphasize more about play styles than anything else. And that's a real testament to pretty much, I guess, just every piece of gear, the build creativity has been afforded from the developer. So I'm really happy about that. These new graces are freaking awesome. The power levels are really exciting and they're more meaningful. I mean, you've got Magatsui's Grace, which is what you said you're using, which is all about yokai weapons and getting a lot of extra benefits from them. You have new graces that are geared towards the 3 primary elements as well. And it's just, you can embrace those playstyles if you see fit and still clear content. I mean, if my character, who doesn't stack damage, and I specifically do my best to avoid damage, all right, I really go out of my way to avoid damage and to avoid playing with a brain at all. It's like, I just don't give a shit. If I can clear content with a subpar character, then I'm sure pretty much anyone can if they put some time in their builds. And that is awesome.
Coming back to the point, the topic of stone penance that was introduced. Was it the first DLC that introduced or the second one? I forgot.
The second one, it was the free update for the second DLC.
Okay. So the fact that the stone mechanic, how it works is that the enemies get larger health and get more attack damage boost the number of levels the stone have. I think they missed an opportunity on that because here's my point. Remember in Nioh 1, when enemies, specifically red enemies, they used to have buffs with the icons on them that stated what kind of buffs they had.
Right.
That's been absent in in Nioh 2. I don't know if they have retained it because all I see in the Nioh 2 red enemy buffs, what they have is the new curse state that they have introduced and an elemental state of inflection of weapon that they can interfere, that they can attack on you. So they have missed an opportunity to get more buffs. The more the Stone of Penance level would have been raised more. So for example, if you have a stone at level +3, the enemies should have certain buffs, like how the Abyss modes had the buffs, the levels, and the more they raised the levels, the more the buffs the enemies uh, uh, correlating to that level correspondence to that stone would have. Like for the example, we know for a fact that Neo 1 red enemy buffs used to have at least 8. From my understanding, I used to see about 8 buffs that a red enemy would have. So I think that was a missed opportunity that they could have gotten. And another thing, I don't know, it was possible to implement, but I felt that if the Stone of Penance had a mechanic where the more the level it had, more the enemy's attack patterns would have been added on it. Like say for example, there's this enemy karaoke. If the stone level penance, if it had been from like 0 to 5, the karaoke enemy would get one more additional attack added on his own movesets. That would have been a much better implementation for incentivizing usage of stone, apart from the added benefits that it gives out with the rarity of the drop loots that it can give, like that. I think these are the two opportunities they might have missed, but I'm not a developer. I can just give out ideas how it could have been done.
I think I actually want to counter that point. So right now I'm showing Curse of the Wise, and in comparison to Curse of the Demon, they added 2 new things for the curse. Health is regained when dealing damage, so whenever they do damage they can get health back, and they do more key damage, so you want to get rid of that curse right away. I think one of the things with the Nioh 1 was just that, yeah, you had your red enemies, and now this time you have your red enemies, but there's a way to work with it. When it comes to the stone, I think they deliberately left out anything too complex or convoluted. I think they want the base experience for the game to kind of all be the same, and just the stone thing to be just some small level of customization when it comes to loot or to power. I think what would happen is, let's say, as you suggested, Kiryokis get an extra attack at, let's say, +5, right? Why not just
Yeah.
have that normally on Curse of the on an enemy on Dream of the Nioh? Just have that normally, right? Why should a player have to be locked away from that unless they do specific things or have to get to the certain things? I think by having the bar fairly low for what is accessible to players, I think that's just, it allows players to get more. I'd much rather have a harder Kiryoki to work with just on the base difficulty than have that be locked away from doing stuff for Stone Penance, the stone mechanic. I think the stone mechanic can just be a way for you to fully flex the power of your gear if you so desired. But as it is right now, while I don't necessarily find the stone mechanic the most interesting, I think the decisions that could be made into that area might just be better put into Dream of the Nioh. Who knows what Dream of the Nioh is going to add? I mean, as it is right now, here's what Curse does on Wise. So if you're a yokai, you take less ki damage, you move faster, you have lifesteal, and you do more ki damage. And then if you're a human, the only difference is they will consume less ki when attacking versus taking less ki damage. Like, it's just, they're slightly different, but now the fact that enemies do more ki damage and get life back makes me want to get rid of that curse even more. Like, Ren Hayabusa on Wise is such a pain in the ass if you do not dispel his curse. You need to go for a burst counter or a grapple or a final blow. Otherwise, what'll happen is he will regain so much health, you're going to struggle. And I've had that issue. So I'm always rushing to keep that curse buff just nullified as long as possible. It is almost essential on certain enemies. Other ones not so much, but with enemies that do a lot of damage, you want to clear that right away. And Ren, it probably does the most of them all. And so it's crazy. And then it makes me think, what are they going to do for Nioh? Like, this is already crazy enough.
100% health, 100% health recovered on an attack. Because it's half right now, that's going to be 100%. I guarantee you that. They're going to go that route.
Okay. Well, I don't know. If they do that, that'd be crazy. But certainly the jump in terms of at least the curse mechanic, they're pretty high. I mean, I don't want to take extra ki damage. I don't want my enemies to nullify my progress. So I'm greatly incentivized and encouraged to deal with it. I like the curse mechanic, believe it or not. Less so because of what the enemies gain from it, but more rather what the player is encouraged to do. So things like, I'm encouraged to use the burst counters. I'm encouraged to go for grapples. I'm encouraged to go for final blows. So it changes how I play. I know you had earlier talked about how every single enemy after a grapple has a 360 attack, counter attack right after the fact. I think the reason they went that route is because it almost resets the fight a little bit. It forces the player to disengage and they kind of have to start over again and kind of repeat the process. But I think it's in that realm, it's a pretty clever way to deal with it because the enemy is attacking and there is a way for you to counterplay and work against it. But it's just, of course, I can understand you may want to keep them pressured, but then again, if you can constantly keep them pressured to the point they have no threat, then that kind of defeats the purpose of having engagement. It's the same way with human opponents, like Saito Toshimitsu. For me, the fact that my strategy of dealing with him is literally preventing him from doing nothing, or from doing anything. And that in of itself takes me out of engagement of the fight, because it's just like, well, this is my strategy, make sure he does nothing. Like, that's just not that fun for me. And I would like things to be more fun, even if it's sometimes at the cost of being mechanically perfect, because at the end of the day, I'm sure they've thought about, hey, we can perfect all these mechanics, but if we do, would that be more fun? And I think overall, the game has done a great job of making players do many different things, try different things, and to just do more fun things. Like, I cannot deny the appeal of so many different tools and so many different builds just being fun. The fact that they are able to nail that, in my opinion, is just ridiculous. Like, I did not think that builds would be as exciting to try as they are now. Like, it's cool. I mean, Death Dancer from Ame no Uzume's Grace is quite literally how I would build a character if I was really interested in going for a ton of damage. It suits how I play perfectly. The fact that dodge attacks are incentivized, there's dodge range up added, and there's just a lot of synergy with that play style, I think is awesome. Same with Akala's Grace, which is about blocking and being just like a tank in that regard. You have so many different things now that you can mix and match that really emphasize play style over necessarily damage or any sense of perfection. And I think having that sense of creative freedom is very, very healthy for the game. I think even some of the annoying wake-up attacks are overall healthy for the game, and that's really what I want to aim for. Something that's very healthy, that's very dynamic, that's very engaging. And I do hope that they continue to do this for DLC 3. In fact, I don't actually have to hope. I'm pretty confident that they will extend this to DLC 3, because overall, DLC 1, while it might have felt a bit short, introduced new ways to interact with the game. DLC 2 took that even further, and I can only imagine what's available in DLC 3 now that they're not going to release a new weapon type. We're going to have a ton of content. We're going to get most likely the skill dump, so our ways to interact with the game are going to be even greater, and that's why I'm pretty hyped about it.
I'm
What
pretty
about you?
hyped about it too because it's the final DLC, and it's the one DLC that has. I remember in Nioh 1, the final boss of DLC 3 had more impact than what the base game Yatsuno Kami had. For example, Nine-Tailed Fox was a better fight in terms of not just in mechanics, but also in terms of how visually it showed off. I'm hoping that DLC 3 can also have that kind of caliber. And also for the fact that I'm little bit skeptical that they have not mentioned weapon, because in the weapon skill tree list that we have, there's one, like, everything is symmetrical except for the downside. Like, there's one weapon slot that's begging to be there, but they have not mentioned that. I don't know if it is possible to get it, or they even looking forward to getting a new weapon, because it's been a blast playing with all the weapons, but then seeing that whole symmetrical order of the list from top to bottom feels really satisfying.
Oh no,
And
of course.
also, one topic that I wanted to discuss, I think I may have I may have discussed with you earlier about a couple of months ago. Uh, Before the second DLC had dropped, or even the first DLC, I had done my own personal level 1 character run, like you had did. You
Okay.
didn't do the demon difficulty, right? You stopped
No,
at
I have
demon.
not.
Yeah. So, for my own personal reasons, I did not went towards strong difficulty. I stopped at samurai difficulty. Now, what I had discussed with you was the regarding of the status effect inflation, specifically how elements on a yokai boss apart applied on till the last couple of health last portion of their health bars when it is applied to me. It's a drastic difference. Like, on 100% health bar, an element is instantly like no problem. But I've noticed that as the fight went on, it was very hard for me to inflict the same element over a period of time. And due to the fact that confusion no longer makes them go into a out of key state, or even depletes their key entirely, and once you inflicted confusion, they just go into a reset state when they go into their dark realm. So it nullifies all the hard work that we done to apply confusion. And it doesn't even last about what, 5 seconds. The only time that I have been successful in inflicting confusion, dual elemental confusion, was I've applied one element on them as their key is draining, and as their key has been fully drained, the second element has been inflicted to prevent them to go into a dark state. Because I've noticed if a yokai boss has their key out of drained, it usually takes about 5 to 6 seconds before they go back into the dark realm. But if it is confused, then it stays much longer. I think upwards of 8 to 10 seconds. I'm not sure. So my pet peeve is that they need to rebalance how the elemental affliction status is done throughout the fight. Like, I can't believe I tested then this theory of mine. Like, for example, I did a boss at about 50 to 40%. I had no elemental infliction on them at all. At 40%, I did my first elemental infliction. It was inflicted instantly. So I guess they must have coded the enemies to be like, okay, the more the elemental infliction has been done on them regularly, the lesser the actual status will be inflicted on them, the more number of times you have done on. I think that's the reason. They need to fix that, because with a subpar, not I would not say subpar, but we are not optimized in the build sense that we can do good damage. We tend to stick to a lower damage range so that we can enjoy the fights more. But it gets very frustrating for me specifically when I go for my elemental infliction and it doesn't pay off. So that's my point.
Yeah, I certainly think that's an issue too when it comes to elemental afflictions. Noticed it, basically the more you apply it and the more it gets cleansed, the harder it is to apply it, to a point where you basically cannot apply it again. And I think that I'm fine with diminishing returns, but not being able to apply an element at all is certainly frustrating. So I do hope that gets addressed, and I know we've kind of pitched that to the developers, so hopefully they'll take that into consideration and do something interesting. But we'll just have to see when it comes to DLC 3. I know with DLC 3, one thing I'm actually hoping for in terms of a free update, because if you haven't been keeping tabs, there's been a free update for everybody. So even if you didn't get the DLC 1 or DLC 2, you do have access to the stone mechanic. You do have access to, what was the other thing with DLC 1? Oh yeah, scrolls. Scrolls are free.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Yes,
Scrolls
yes,
are
definitely.
free. So
this is like, I want to state out the philosophy of this companies in terms of giving out content to its player base. This is 2020. Players are expected to shell out change. They are expected to shell out a couple of bucks for anything that comes out. Like for any modern AAA game that comes out with microtransactions and all such. In order to get content, you have to pay more for that. And I'm very, very happy as an Indian guy who doesn't have to shell out that much amount of money, and it's on a very regularly low level in terms of income status wise. I'm very happy that all the content apart from the DLC that I paid is almost free. So hats off to Team Ninja for not scrunching up my wallet in order to experience the full capacity that it can give.
Oh yeah, I'm really grateful to them for that. I mean, so many AAA studios just don't give a shit, man. They just don't. But even if you just got base game, you get scrolls and you get the stone. Like, they're yours. Like, that's awesome. I sincerely hope that we do get another free update for DLC 3, and my hope that it's actually a PvP update. That would be amazing. I do think that PvP would be very healthy for this game. I think if they just had it, I think if it was just handled a little better this time, it would be very healthy for the game. Of course, not just for the fact that, of course, PvP against good players and whatnot can open up so many opportunities in the same way games like Smash Brothers are really well known for that, but also for all the unintended benefits that normal gameplay is going to get. I know back with Nioh 1, one of the biggest things that came as a result of PvP was simply parry disabled, as in your attacks don't get deflected. I know a lot of players have hoped for that, and perhaps that would be brought back with a PvP system, or maybe even things like Pierce Guard, so that there's another way to deal with enemies that just block spam endlessly over and over again. So just having some nice, interesting ways, and maybe I don't care for that many of them, but just having some nice, interesting ways to interact with the game more could be brought by having a PvP edition. I of course, never really got to dabble in the Nioh 1 PvP because by the time I got to the game, unfortunately, the game was pretty much, it just wasn't as lively as it had been the first time it had started. So now that I'm fresh into Nioh 2 and I've been keeping up to it, I do hope for the opportunity to engage in PvP and really just have some fun with so many players. I mean, it'd be cool if there was just like a Nioh 2 PvP tournament or something like that. I don't know. Just something cool like that. And then maybe players would be exposed to skillful gameplay as opposed to just like maximum build power or something. I don't know. But that's what I personally want. What about you? If you think there's going to be a free update, do you think PvP would be the best decision? Do you think perhaps there could be something else? I'd just like to know.
Considering the fact that you have mentioned that PvP will invigorate a new fresh blood of life to the players who had stayed before and now want to go back again. That will be very nice to see. Also, I would like to see Soothsayer get your ass whooped, and mine also, because
No.
AAA rank that he had got in the first game is very awesome to see. Like, hats off to him. Yeah, PvP is an aspect that I'm not personally attached to it, but it had a lot of benefits, as you had stated, that it gave certain properties, certain stats, certain added benefits to the PvE aspect that helped a lot. And also for the fact that we can have more interactivity, not just in the community for, hey, I just want to have a co-op with you. Like, no, fuck you, man, I want to fight. That kind of mentality can have a play in this system, in this environment. That's also good. Second thing that I want to see is how are they going to deal with the end game abyss? Like, is it going to be like how it was in the first game with the 999 floors? Like, personally speaking, I dropped out of abyss after 240 floors because it took a lot of time and I was getting burned out of it. Specifically after that one particular floor with Sasuke Kojiro, the backdasher with the Odachi, and the Onmuroki chicken guy. Oh,
yeah.
those two. That floor had me for a lot of days stuck in that. So I don't want that kind of a scenario where it's just levels upon levels upon levels. I'm pretty much sure many people want to see a more refined state of the abyss, like have it condensed to 99 instead of 999, but have each level as an individual set of fights that are predetermined. Uh, for example, I don't know if we have seen any dual boss fights in Nioh 2. The closest that we have come to it is with Hanzo and Honda with Mumio as an AI character. But that's not technically two versus one. I would like to see that kind of aspect come back. And also with how the in-game content, um, I would like to see Sloth and Torpor, please do not make a return. That was a buff that I had to go for every level, go in every room to get rid of that because no one likes that. No one likes that buff. I'm also looking forward to see more added buffs, not just for humans, but on yokais also, because elemental inflection, it's all right. but I want to see something like what we had in Nioh 1, like weaken armor, weaken arms. That kind of shit intrigued me. Like, okay, I get hit, one of my graces get destroyed. Like, oh shit, I have to be careful. I have to plan out how will I deal with this situation. So that I'm into that kind of aspect. Okay, let the player get have be more at a disadvantageous stage rather than giving buffs. That's my point.
I see what you mean. I think perhaps they definitely have stated, and this was well before the game's release, that they wanted to make the Abyss more interesting than it had been before. Now, I guess the old quote unquote version of the Abyss is what now we see as the scrolls. I overall really enjoy the scrolls. They're pretty damn fun. There's a lot of replayability. The fact that you can co-op and do them with friends is really exciting too. And it's just a fun way to interact and guess work with loot. So I don't know what their new version of the Abyss is, but in all honesty, the fact that they've done some pretty wild things that, in my opinion, have all hit the mark, it just makes me excited for what the possibilities of Abyss are going to be. I don't think it's going to be 1,000 floors of pure boredom. Nothing in Nioh 2 has suggested that route whatsoever. I think everything they've done in the game has been awesome. I think literally everything they've done in the game has been the right direction. It's been an improvement, and I think players overall just want more of it. Those that really enjoy the game, such as you and I, we just want more of this good stuff. It's such a masterpiece in all honesty, and I really do firmly believe that when DLC 3 comes out, which really isn't that far away, it's less than a month. All right, less than a month away, by the way.
Less than a month away.
Yeah.
I hope I get my hands on that before. I'm craving to play it more, but due to circumstances, I have not been able to get my hands on it. So my hands are itching really bad. Yeah.
Well, it's I think regardless with all the things that are coming out for Nioh 2, I mean, seriously, like, it's just DLC 3 has me excited. They really are underselling, hey, endgame content, like in their little title card of what they're gonna have. It's just like on bullet points. It's like new weapons, new things. Okay, all right, new this, new that, endgame content. I'm like, it's like you can sell it more, and so I think DLC 3 is probably going to be the best DLC we get. I think across both games. I am
Definitely.
optimistic. I do firmly believe that the skill trees are mostly going to be filled up. I do think that if DLC 1 and DLC 2 are a taste of the type of things that are come for DLC 3, whether it be new skills, new guardian spirits, new yokai types, like just whatever, I think DLC 3 is going to be absolutely a fantastic finale to this already amazing game. I mean, you were saying before, Yamato no Orochi was a pretty shitty boss for Nioh 1, and Ninetales was better. But then compare it to how we have it here. Otakemaru versus Yamato no Orochi. Massive difference. When I beat Otakemaru the first time, I was like, holy shit, what an amazing conclusion to the base game. Like, that was crazy. And then, let's go with Otakemaru, alright? Awesome. DLC 1, we've had Yoshitsune, alright? Absolutely amazing boss there too, and I think he's just solid. DLC 2, sure, we had Lightning Gods of Yomi, but then you had freaking Raiko, man. And then you had all this extra stuff and all these other things, and it's just like, it was just a lot of fun. I think pretty much everyone agrees that DLC 2 overall as a package was more interesting than DLC 1, and the reasons for that can vary. So DLC 3, I firmly believe it's just going to be even greater than anything that I can expect, because that's how DLC 2 was. Their way for handling builds was off the charts awesome. Their way for introducing many new abilities was awesome, and it's just, I really think DLC 3 is going to cement this game as being a masterpiece, man. I mean, I wouldn't gush about it so much. I wouldn't make fucking podcasts if I didn't actually enjoy this game to that level.
Yes, definitely. And on top of that, I'm having my fingers crossed. That boss in DLC 2, Tsuchigomu, is there any information on him that states he's from the Black Spider clan?
Okay, let me take a look. So let me look at Tsuchigumo, which I know is an enemy that gave a lot of people trouble. I went the wrong way, I think. Almost there. Alright, so Tsuchigumo, I don't think they make any real reference to it being from Ninja Gaiden, so
If there is
yeah.
any information that states that he is from the Black Spider clan, that I'm very much hoping that Team Ninja listens to us and give us Genshin. Like fuck,
Oh yeah,
Genshin
yeah.
is the ultimate. Like he was the antagonist on which the whole Spider Clan was rested upon. Like it'll be a really good callback. We have Hayabusa, that is for sure. But if we get Genshin, and like
I
I'll
think it's
be
possible.
very
I
sad.
actually I was surprised that Hayabusa was the second boss. I thought they'd have Genshin with the claws. I'm like, oh, he's guaranteed to be a boss. I'm like, no, okay. They might, but I think when it comes to the Ninja Gaiden series, they're kind of trying. It seems like they're kind of trying to move past it to have a new intellectual property and not be weighed down by the past. I mean, Nioh certainly does have a bunch of Easter eggs in that regard, especially with the equivalent of was it Rosetsu or Rotetsu from Ninja Gaiden 2, but. And they do a lot of things. I mean, Falcon Claws are an actual weapon. Dragon Sword is an actual weapon. They're porting moves from Ninja Gaiden, like the Izuna Drop, Tiger Claws, so on and so forth. And so it's. I think they're using that as inspiration, but I don't think when it comes to their design space, they want to be that limited. I don't know how they would introduce Genshin. They'd probably have to introduce Fiend Genshin over normal Genshin, because I don't see the value in normal Genshin anymore. Fiend Genshin, probably.
Yeah.
That would be crazy. I mean, honestly, the more we talk about this, the more I think they could just do so much. I mean, can you imagine? Let's just say, all right, they bring back Nioh 1 bosses, as they've done before with bosses like White Tiger and Nue, right? Which I think were overall well done. Giant Toad, I know you had your issues with it, but I still think it was an appropriate upgrade. Let's say they continue to bring back all the Nioh 1 bosses, make them appropriate for Nioh 2 for Abyss-only content, okay? That's awesome.
Definitely.
Could you imagine fighting like Yuki Onna again or Sanada
Definitely.
Yukimura again?
Yuki Onna is a boss that I'm thinking they might give us Yuki Onna, because she was a character in the second game that we had screen time on her, and it's a shame that she couldn't be introduced as a boss fight. But I'm pretty much sure that they have thought about it, because Oda is here. It might be even possible that Yuki Onna can be termed as a ghost. It might not be Yuki Onna, the wife of Oda
But just like
Nobunaga, but
one of them. Because it's in the same way Nure Onna it translates to one thing. Yuki Onna is similar in that regard too.
Yes,
so it could be a Yuki Onna that we fight. Just like we fight a White Tiger or a Giant Toad. Like, I don't really care how they do it. I just want that shit. I know for sure I would love to fight all the Nioh 1 bosses, bring them back from Nioh, and to put them appropriately into Nioh 2, because it's been awesome. And like, holy shit, it's just, there's so many possibilities for them to work with the Abyss if they just literally do whatever they want. And I really think they might. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for a bunch of new skills. I'm hopeful for a bunch of Nioh 1 bosses being brought back and just having a solid, fully fleshed Nioh 2 experience, because that would be amazing. I really, really want that, but again, we don't know. All they said for Abyss stuff is end game content. I'm like, this doesn't tell me anything. Tell me, bitches.
They need to work on that particular aspect of not just showing a static screen, but have some glimpses of what the rooms would be like in a clip, or something like how the new bosses not show the static faces, but a 5-second clip of what the moves they are doing, something like that. A static image doesn't entice the imagination as how other means of showcase does. So they need to work on that. They can put trailer about let's say a week before the release, which contains not just images but also clips of the new bosses, something about the new enemies, possibly a new weapon, or even better, some reoccurring characters from other franchises, that would be mind blowing.
Yeah, it would be mind blowing. I don't know what they're gonna do. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I think it's gonna be a really good time. Unfortunately, that's all I got time for. There is much more I'd like to talk about, and I blame you because you made me start talking about DLC 3, and I'm like, oh my god, what could they do for DLC 3?
Oh. And before we go off,
Yeah.
because we are Desi boys,
Oh my
and being a
god.
Desi boy, I
No.
have some commitment.
Oh
This
no.
is a shout out to Dum,
Oh
specifically
no.
Dum बिरयानी.
Oh no.
भैया जी ऐसा है, चलो इनके स्ट्रीम में आते हैं, बोलते हैं तू चीज बड़ी है मस्त मस्त. वाह.
No! Get that cheesy Indian
Yes,
shit off of here.
yes, definitely.
Ah. For those of you who don't speak Hindi, you don't want to know. Please,
Google
it's
it,
just cheesy
Google it,
movies, man.
please.
No, do
Please
not
Google it.
Google tu cheese buddy
Yes,
hai must. Don't do it. You
yes,
will literally just poke your eyes out. For just don't. Don't. Why did you have to bring that in?
yes, it
Oh
has to
man.
be. You're an Indian.
Oh god.
It's
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
blood.
yeah. Yes, it's
So,
in my blood. Thanks.
so I'm grateful that you have accepted me as a guest. Most of the time, people won't accept people like me coming into there and like, hey, screw you, fuck you. Like, I'm really honorable to be a part of the community that I've witnessed from far away, like with the eyes out of the window. And it's great to have a talk, not just with you, but with other players also. And I highly respect the community that I've been a part of it for, I think, more than 2 years. Wait, when
Yeah,
was
it's been a long time.
it's been a long time. Yes.
But
So,
thank you, and I know you're thanking me, but I just want to say thank you once again because you've been a valuable asset to the community. I know you're a shit talker on my stream, and that's all fun and all, but you're the You gave me the idea for the combo mads. All right, the combo
oh,
mads and a lot of my own personal YouTube growth and whatnot would not have been possible without just your ideas. And you've been a valuable asset to the community, even when you ask stupid shit like, hey, what's a yokai encyclopedia completion rate? I'm like, who gives a fuck about this, man? But
I do.
yes, you do. And I think maybe you're the only Nioh player who does. Or I don't know. I don't know. Actually, there's probably more. But seriously, thank you for your contributions. And it's actually an honor to have you on this podcast and giving your perspectives from somebody who may not be as obsessed, or actually probably is more obsessed with Nioh than I am. But seriously, thank you so much for being on here. It's been a pleasure
Always
to
a
have you.
pleasure. Yes.
Do you have
Same
any
to
last things you want to say besides tu cheese bari hai must?
Any lasting words to leave off my
Yeah.
legacy? I said hi, mom. Let me say hi, dad. Listen to me. I have become famous. I wanna become famous. Don't ban me, please.
Okay. All right, man. And okay, thanks. I can't. This podcast is over. Thank you everyone so much for witnessing this. Thank you once again, Payne, and we'll see everyone next time. Take care and peace out.